Hello, and thank you for joining us on another episode of our podcast, where we will be discussing some key issues around business financing. So, not to wait any longer, let's dive on in. So, across Cumbria, high street banks are quietly disappearing. In some towns, the last bank branch has already gone, and while banking hubs are being talked about, they don't replace the advice and relationship-based support that local businesses once relied on. And for years, business owners could sit down with the bank manager, talk through challenges, plans for growth, or short-term cash flow pressures. That conversation has largely vanished, but the need for financing hasn't. Now, in that gap, new lenders are stepping in. Some are helpful, many are fast, but not all are fair, transparent, or right for small businesses, especially when decisions are being made under pressure. So today's conversation is about that reality. We're talking honestly about business finance in Cumbria, the risks, the misconceptions, and where local businesses can go for clear, trustworthy advice before making big financial decisions. I'm joined by James Todhunter from Enterprise Answers, an organisation that's been supporting Cumbrian businesses for over 2 decades, taking a very different relationship-led approach to funding. So James, can you please shed some light on these issues for our listeners and give us some insights into the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that conditions for businesses are pretty tough right now, not just for Cumbrian businesses, but up and down the whole country. They have been for quite a long time now for a whole plethora of reasons, but thinking back to things like Brexit, COVID, huge increases in national minimum wage and national insurance, utilities, business rates, the list goes on. And if you look in the profit and loss of any business today, you will see challenges in every single line. We've just received a red flag report from Begbie's Trainer, which shows businesses considered to be in critical financial distress increasing by 53% year on year. And thinking specifically about Cumbrian businesses, the most severely impacted are leisure, hospitality and tourism businesses. So at a time when we need lots of business support, the opposite is actually true. And we see last week Santander closing the last bank in town in Whitehaven, which is just another example of the shrinking sources of traditional guidance and support for people and businesses.
Okay, thank you, James. So these challenges that Cumbrian businesses are facing are starting to be quite a serious issue. But can you tell us, why is this conversation important right now?
One of the things we are seeing is the emergence and very fast growth of high-cost online lending platforms, which are essentially replacing the old banking model. And while some of these are okay, there are very many that are extremely high cost and very poor choices for business funding, really because businesses don't know where else to go. So we're seeing a high prevalence of these really expensive borrowing facilities in businesses. And so we're seeing a perfect storm of very tough economic conditions, lack of advisory services on the high street and through traditional channels, and the emergence now of very high cost online lending platforms. So these three different things are leading to quite a bit of concern right now.
So can you tell us a bit about Enterprise Answers and how they fit into all of this?
Yeah, so Enterprise Answers is a not-for-profit lender to small businesses. We're based in Penrith and operate throughout Cumbria. It was originally started following research carried out by what is now the British Business Bank and Salford University, which found that rural businesses in Cumbria were significantly underserved in terms of the availability of finance. And so Enterprise Answers was given a pot of 300,000 initially to lend over a 16-month project. And he did it very well. So over 20 years later, we're very much here and growing, having lent over 20 million to a huge number of businesses. And now we are a face-to-face relationship-based business lender to all types of businesses across the county.
What does the outlook for Enterprise Answers look like over the coming months and the years ahead?
So despite everything I've already said, we think the future is really positive, both for the county and for our organisation. Cumbrian businesses are very resilient, and although I have absolutely no data to back that up, we know that's true because in Enterprise Answers we're all Cumbrian. We've worked with Cumbrian businesses for a very long time, And we've got real examples of where face-to-face funding support, when the business had been turned away by its own bank, has resulted in great outcomes in terms of growth, jobs, and supporting the local economy. So we are very confident in our model and our local face-to-face approach, and our job now is to meet many more businesses in the months and the years ahead.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background, James, and exactly what it is that you do here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm the investment director for Enterprise Answers, and my role primarily is to meet with our clients and look at their funding needs and take them forward. I started out with the Cumbrian Building Society when I was 16 years old on a junior training program, and so I've been in the personal financing space and then went into commercial and business banking for many years after that. So I've got a broad experience of lending to both individuals and businesses of all shapes and sizes, and I've done that over many years. Enterprise Answers is an organisation that is doing just really great things in the county, and one that I wanted to join to help businesses with their funding requirements.
Good stuff. Thank you, James. So you mentioned slightly earlier as well that now that the high street banks are sort of moving away, closing up shop, it's created that sort of vacuum gap, and that there's these new sort of fintech lenders and providers coming in. So can you just help sort of explain kind of what's going on here so we can sort of help sort of spread awareness of that particular issue?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a business owner and you have considered speaking to your own bank, you would know very quickly that actually it's very, very difficult to do that in the first place. The bank approval rates are down now to something like 3 out of 10. So the chances of actually getting finance from your own or another high street bank are very, very small indeed. So what do you then do? You do what a lot of us do now, and that's, go on the internet and Google it. And what you're then presented with is a page of quite flashy, slick business lending options that promise, a very easy process and very quick funding. So it isn't hard to see why businesses do this, because they don't really have any other option. And we've had data from the British Business Bank that says that in the last 12 months, these types of lenders have lent something like £1 billion. So they're very widely used now. And part of the problem is that what we see on the front screen isn't necessarily what the reality of these funding agreements are behind that. So they often offer very low rates, and that's quite possibly because they are monthly rates rather than annual rates. So, we see them advertised at 1.5% or 2%, and the business owner doesn't really realise that that is on a monthly basis, i.e. sort of, 24% per annum. So there is an easy fix for businesses out there, but certainly not necessarily the right thing for them. And, businesses need to think about the best ways of funding the requirement, and they need to think about their own business and their own balance sheet and the right trigger to pull for the right financial need. And that's where the advice gap is missing, because these easy sort of payday loans almost, then there's no thought about whether it's the right thing for the purpose, and often they're very difficult to get out of. So the warning is really, take advice first.
Quite interesting to hear that, really. So what would you say are the long-term consequences for the businesses that end up taking out these kinds of loans?
I mean, ultimately, it's actually prohibitive to growth, and often means that difficult situations just become even more difficult. So what we're seeing inside the businesses that we're meeting at the moment is a lot of these facilities that are very, very expensive. They're very difficult then to get out of, because they're often such high interest rates that they're either just paying interest or they're not reducing the capital quickly at all. And ultimately, it's just making ongoing affordability so much more difficult for them. So the long-term consequences are that businesses are actually putting themselves in worse situations than they otherwise could do.
Right, okay, so it almost sounds a bit like a poison chalice, almost. So could you tell us some of the common mistakes business owners make when desperate for cash flow?
So the two main mistakes we see are, number one, not using the right kind of finance product for the underlying requirement. And the second one is taking out finance product that's very, very high cost, possibly without even realizing. So there are all sorts of finance products with different names like overdraft, asset finance, invoice finance, roll-up loans, and they're designed to do different things. Some are for day-to-day working capital, some are for things like vehicles, equipment, and some are for longer-term assets like buying another business or property, for example. And it's really important to use the right tool for the right job, mainly because they are structured the right way for the need, but also because some are just not suitable at all if used the wrong way. Using the wrong product can also lead to much higher costs of repayment if used for the wrong purpose. So things that are perhaps longer term finance products being used for very short term needs or vice versa can mean that ultimately the business owner pays back far greater than they would do if they'd used the right product in the first place. And then it's just about looking at the terms really closely and understanding them fully. Like I said earlier, some appear to be very, very low, but actually they end up being very, very high. So our advice for the business owner is to take their time if they can, not rush into anything, and get some advice either from us, from their accountant, or from either of the brilliant support organisations in Cumbria, Cumbria Growth Hub, or Enterprise in Cumbria.
Okay, great. Thank you, James. And that moves us on very nicely into our next section that I'd like to discuss on exactly how Enterprise Answers can offer solutions to these issues that we're facing.
So we are sort of refocusing as an organisation because of the underlying sort of circumstances that we've talked about. We really think that there's an acute need now for face-to-face business advice and better solutions. We are looking at rebranding ourselves to Business Finance Cumbria just to give that more focused approach, just to show businesses and professional advisors in the county that we are there for them. Specifically, we are embarking on a number of different business development activities so that we can build our profile. Not enough businesses know about us and are aware of the things that we do. So we've got a big year ahead of us in terms of growing our reputation and growing our profile. We have redefined our purpose, which is to help Cumbria prosper and be the best place to live and work in the UK. We've defined our vision, which is to be the first call for business funding for every Cumbrian business and advisor. We want them to know that they can make that call and they will get a great service from us in helping them. And also just redefining our sort of service commitment in terms of what we offer, that face-to-face human relationship-based approach. The fact that we're a not-for-profit lender means that we're focused on outcomes and solutions rather than just profit-making activities. And also the fact that we're, hyper-local. So all the lending decisions are made by us within our offices. We don't have fancy computer systems telling us that we can't do something. We are humans and we will look at trying to find solutions in each and every occasion. We'll work with the professional advisors around those businesses where we can to help us get to a place where we can back a management team and we can help them unlock the potential of their businesses and the opportunities for growth.
Okay, fantastic. And have you got any sort of real world examples of some of the clients that you've worked with and some of the results that you've got for them?
Yeah, definitely. So recent cases would involve a retailer that had quite significant losses in the previous financial year, and we were able to work with their accountants to understand exactly why those losses existed. They were to do with initial startup costs, and also just demonstrate the viability of that business on an ongoing basis. Couldn't do that without the accountant support, so we put together a cash flow forecast and a P&L forecast, and we were all in agreement that the business was very much a viable proposition, and we just wanted to be able to easily and simply show that so that we could back the management team with finance and move them forward. Very few other lenders would have done something like that when you've got a business that have got losses in their accounts from previous years. So again, this is just our unique way of looking at management teams and working with advisors to get the right outcome.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example of the way that you work, isn't it? Because that retailer, applying for something online, looking at the numbers that they had been trading at, recently, they probably wouldn't have had a very high chance of success, would they?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, a computer-based decision would have looked at a set of accounts, seen losses in there, and probably said no. The amount of money that they borrowed as well would have been well in excess of what a bank would have lent without, taking bricks and mortar security from business owners. We were able to use the government guarantee scheme to support the loan that we made. And we were very happy to back the management team because of the information that we received and we put together with the business's accountants.
Brilliant. Yeah, I guess it just goes to show that face-to-face interaction really does have its benefits. So have you got any other sort of examples you'd like to share?
I guess another one would be where we have lent to a restaurant group, and initially they just needed some funding for some renovations and improvements to a site. But what we found when we talked to them was quite a lot of the loans that we've talked about already, the fintech loans, very high interest, very, very difficult terms, and huge monthly commitments for that business. We were able to restructure that, refinance that, and give them the working capital to carry out the things they wanted to. So ultimately, they were paying far less on a monthly basis and getting, the additional support than they were by just struggling to maintain the very, very expensive finance that they had. Within there were 2 or 3 loans that were in excess of 30-40% interest rate, so pretty nasty.
Okay, James, thanks for that. There's some really good results that you've got there. So moving on to the next section of our podcast, have you got any sort of advice for business owners that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is just to actually take advice. That is the core message, is that it is out there. This is the positivity that I wanted to bring to this. There are organisations out there like ours, like your accountants, like Cumbria Chamber and the Growth Hub that really, really want to talk to you as a business and help. So the first thing is seek that advice. Don't wait for it till it becomes too late. You can seek advice at any stage, even when you're not actually necessarily wanting to borrow money there and then, and just so that you know what to do and how to do it when the time is right. Or if you have things that you've already got, finance agreements that you want to have looked at, then just pick up the phone to, like say, one of your close advisors and take that advice as soon as you can.
Yeah, I think that's sound advice, because there are people and organisations out there that genuinely do want to help businesses, and especially, in and around Cumbria, and see it thrive, but it's just being able to find them, find out where they are. So after everything that we've discussed, what do you think the outlook for Cumbria looks like?
Actually incredibly positive. Despite the challenging backdrop, Cumbrian businesses are incredibly resilient. There are some absolutely fantastic things that are happening in the county and all around the county. There are some fantastic organisations that are supporting and promoting Cumbrian businesses. And so I think we should be, extremely optimistic about the future. There will always be challenges in business, but what we're talking about is the availability of good advice from lots of different organisations. And, there is plenty of support for businesses out there. So go and take it and, grow your businesses into the future.
Okay, brilliant. So thank you again for joining us today, James, on the podcast. It's been really great to have you on and share your insights and your thoughts on the current challenges that we've been discussing. So just to recap everything, if this discussion has taught us anything, it's that there is local face-to-face support available. You should also seek out support sooner rather than later, so you know the best way to finance your business and don't end up rushing into a financial trap. And use the professional advisors that are readily available around you, like your accountant, the Growth Hub, and Enterprise Answers. And this is to get the best possible advice and the chances of success for your business. So thank you for all for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.